Welcome to the chaos sector. We return to the Matrix. Well, Kamala Harris is spiraling out of control. And that's an understatement, because it's actually terrifying. We're indirectly throwing out campaign ads for Trump at this point, just because the Democratic candidate is just so horrible. Someone from the Value Attainment podcast described Kamala Harris the best. They claimed that Harris is a combination of boring and fake. Well, it's deeper than that. Not only is she boring and fake, she is not qualified, not even knowledgeable on any of the issues, and she also is unfortunately, not that smart. Sorry, but it's just the truth. So you have 5 bad strikes on Harris, which is just astounding. If she was a few of those, damn, at least one of those, there will be a slither of influence. Let's say she was boring, but was genuine, okay, people would listen to what she has to say from a policy perspective. Let's say she was exciting, but fake, people would still gravitate towards her based on the excitement. Let's say she was a former businesswoman, but wasn't exciting. Once again, policy would be the interests for the American people. Yet, there would be excitement due to the clash of the businessman and the businesswoman. Good political food for the American voters. In this political climate, where everything is based on perception, you have to bring something to the table. Either it be excitement, qualifications, or just show your genuine side that resonates with the American people who are scouting you on the national stage. On a side note, I can't recall at any moment in her interviews, rallies, town halls, of Harris mentioning her background in economics. Yet, didn't she graduate with a degree in political science and economics from Howard University? Excuse me, this should be one of her strong suits. Yet, the way she speaks in terms of economics, it sounds like someone who has no knowledge of the subject. When asked about the economy and inflation, Harris clearly didn't understand the basic concept of economics and inflation. That is unacceptable if you're running to become the commander-in-chief over the executive branch, which oversees the Federal Reserve. Even a high school student can articulate better on the subject, and they are still learning. But Harris is an empty vessel, trying to connect a damaged plug to the outlet. In other words, no energy will flow through. Her energy level is lower than Trump's and Old Joe. 2 elderly men who are able to motivate the American people. Yes, even Old Joe in his withering state is still capable of relaying a message that has substance. Because he is an actual politician, that's what they specialize in, messaging. Trump, of course, is capable of doing such, based on his career in business, and now as a politician. You can learn to be a politician, you know. It's not difficult at all. Kamala Harris has the advantage, to be honest. From the identity political angle, first woman to become vice president, first woman of color to become vice president, and has the blueprint laid out for her to accomplish the biggest historical feat for women and women of color. But you know what I think the main problem is? I think the main reason Harris is incapable of connecting to the American people is because her conscience is eating away at her. Examining her facial expression, it reveals someone who knows they have done something wrong, who knows that they are not being honest. Heck, ironically, that means she still has a moral compass. And choosing to deviate from that morality only leads to more self-sabotaging, which leads to such a facial expression. Career corrupt politicians have long lost that moral compass. They can lie to your face, with their own straight face, and think nothing of it. Harris is new to the scene generally speaking, and she hasn't gotten her dishonest face mold in just yet. Unfortunately, I don't think she will reach that point, because she's already being interrogated on a national stage. Mind you, these are the facial expressions when being interviewed. The statement, quote, "Obviously I'm not Joe Biden," is very revealing. It's Harris saying that she is not really a part of this administration, rather, is used to get him out and become the next president. This was of course a conspiracy, or better known as a coup. And this is what weighs heavy on Harris' brain, knowing that at any potential moment, this could leak out in the news feeds. Of course, it's already been claimed by those in the right-wing media and other political analysts. But by official documentation or verbal testimonies, it would be devastating to Harris' career. And how could she defend herself? Well, she would have the same vague responses as now, and have the same facial expression as seen here. You have to understand the context of what that statement is implying. I'm not Joe Biden. Well, we already know you're not Joe Biden. What are you really saying here? Okay, I'll tell you the truth. When I say I'm not Joe Biden, I'm saying that my plan for America is the complete opposite of what he envisioned. Me and my fellow wacky liberals got the old man to do what we wanted. Now that he's done it, we successfully accomplished the mission. There's no need for the old man anymore. I will take over from here. This is what I'm not Joe Biden really means. In a recent guest appearance on The View and The Colbert Show, Harris was asked if there was anything she would do different as president from the current administration. Both times she stated no, and there's nothing that comes to mind. But, you are running on a slogan of change, right? What change? Harris claims it's time for a new generation of leadership. Oh, a new generation of leadership. Well, this is a subliminal shot at old Joe. Put that into context as well. It's not really based on the age, more so the ideology. Old Joe is a throwback moderate Democrat. Sure, we all know his closet is full of skeletons and a textbook corrupt politician. But when it comes to policies, his center-left, which is good as it gets in the Democratic Party. That's the generation that Harris is trying to overthrow and push out of the party. This is what's currently happening in Congress as well, by the Squad, a bunch of socialist progressives, and the Socialist Democratic Party, who are also trying to uproot the moderate base in the Democratic Party. They have effectively pushed several people out already. Kristen Sinema, who was a Democrat, left the party, retired from politics, and is now a registered independent. Tulsi Gabbard, who was a Democrat, left the party, became a Republican, and is now endorsing Donald Trump. RFK Jr. was a Democrat, left the party, became an independent, and is now endorsing Donald Trump. Now think about these three former Democrats. They were actually the new generation of the Democratic Party. Solid, more to the center, and weren't radicalized by the progressive ideology. And there are more starting to depart from the party. And it's because the left have become so radical that moderate Democrats such as Gabbard, RFK Jr., and even moderate progressives such as Sinema has said it's just too much to bear. And this of course has hurt the Democratic Party in connection to their selection of candidates to choose from in election cycles. Bad company policies lead to good employees leaving the company. Simple. But Harris, though, instead of being a bridge to salvage the image of the Democratic Party, decides to double down on the radical progressive ideology, which has also led to voters gradually distancing themselves as well. We left a comment, which was very spot on in regards to Kamala Harris. It's worth mentioning here. Quote, Harris stabbed old Joe in the back, and is out for revenge. She keeps saying, I'm not Joe Biden. This is a subliminal shot that she wasn't a part of the administration, rather, placed there to replace him, which happened. And old Joe, before he passes away, will definitely expose the truth. Harris is one of those most corrupt people in politics, and that's saying a lot because they're all corrupt. She's that blackmailing type of corrupt, very dangerous. Not that smart politically, but very clever in other areas. Unquote. I think that pretty much describes Harris to a T. This facial expression explains it all, an expression Harris had when discussing the plot with other wackos in the party to kick old Joe to the curb. Oh yes, they're gonna love me. I will be the female version of Obama. I'm gonna be the president. I will have all the power. Until things started to fall apart, because she didn't truly grasp how important a single interview can be. Running her campaign on virtue signaling, identity politics, huge support from Hollywood, and even with mainstream media pulling most of the weight for her, it appeared she was gaining tremendous support, right? Then the rallies slowed down, the interviews started popping up, and she couldn't answer a single question. And then there's more, she just can't seem to get away from the nonsense. But when you advocate for ultra-progressive ideologies, you best believe you're gonna have support coming from far left field. Which leads us to the next wacky issue. Honestly, I will leave this to my younger colleagues. They have more tolerance for such insanity.
Great job, I'll take it from here. You see this image? What is the first thing that comes to your mind when observing this woman? More than likely it would be sex, right? Now the next question would be, what does sex have to do with this episode? Or better yet, what does Kamala Harris have to do with the topic of sex? Well, let's find out. Quote, porn industry jumps into the presidential campaign, targeting Project 2025. In 7 swing states, the industry's websites will feature ads decrying the conservative policy blueprint's proposed ban on pornography. Unquote. Okay, this should be interesting. Quote, just when you thought everyone had already jumped into the 2024 campaign, here come the porn stars. 17 pornographic film actors on Monday announced that they had launched a $100,000 ad campaign on porn sites warning that Project 2025, the Heritage Foundation blueprint for a Republican administration that has been, okay, hold on, they are rambling. Whoever wrote this article needs to learn how to compact and complete. It's rambling, you know? I'll read it the way it should be written. Just when you thought everyone had already jumped into the 2024 campaign, here come the porn stars. On Monday, 17 pornographic film actors announced that they had launched a $100,000 ad campaign on their websites, targeting Project 2025, The Heritage Foundation blueprint for a proposed Republican administration has been a centerpiece of some Democratic campaigns, which claim the foundation wants to ban pornography and imprison people who produce it. The online ads will run in the states that will decide the presidency: Pennsylvania, Michigan, Wisconsin, North Carolina, Georgia, Arizona, and Nevada. Unquote. Oh my fucking days, do you see how clean that was? Journalism and news reporting has become so unprofessional. Anywho, let's continue. Quote, the architects of the Hands Off My Porn campaign are nothing if not aware of the polling. Vice President Harris is losing to former President Trump among men, but younger men might be winnable, and pornographic websites are among the most heavily trafficked on the internet. This is just, it's flat out derptastic. The Democrats are so desperate to siphon voters from society. They are basically traveling through the dark web to find support. I mean, think about that statement. I'll read it again just to magnify the desperation. Quote, Vice President Harris is losing to former President Trump among men, but younger men might be winnable, and pornographic websites are among the most heavily trafficked on the internet. Unquote. This is complete fucking madness. I'm pretty sure the Harris campaign has nothing to do with this, but even still, it shows the truth about the polls. If porn actors are putting up money to endorse you, then you have some self-reflecting to do. Now they are claiming that Project 2025 has legislation proposals that want to ban pornography, and anyone producing it shall be imprisoned. Just for clarification, here's a segment of the legislation from the project. Alright, kind of give the audience some time to scan through it for source verification. Okay, that's what the author claims it says. We downloaded the PDF of the proposition and scrolled down to the topic of pornography. Let's see here. The article does have the same proposition. Quote, pornography, manifested today in the omnipresent propagation of transgender ideology and sexualization of children, for instance, is not a political Gordian not inextricably binding up disparate claims about free speech, property rights, sexual liberation, and child welfare. Okay, let's stop right here because there are a few terms here that need to be explained. The first term is omnipresent. Now we all know what it means, but in context to the subject, let's break it down. They are basically focusing on transgenderism and the education system that is teaching children about sexuality. The project is saying that this indoctrination is widely spread throughout the country, well, mainly in far-left states and cities. Now, they have a legitimate argument, as there is evidence that this agenda is being pushed onto children. I mean, heck, Tim Walz, as governor of Minnesota, signed an executive order to allow the state to go into any household and obtain custody of children who they claim are, quote, being denied gender reassignment care. That is a form of dictatorship, government control over the citizens and how they raise their children. So that's a legitimate claim backed by evidence. Next, you have the phrase Gordian knot, which is a difficult problem primarily solved by direct action, either forceful or extreme. In context to the claims of transgenderism being taught in schools to children, the project is saying to combat this problem, there has to be direct countermeasures, which may have to be taken in an extreme manner. So far, there isn't anything malicious here. The project is attempting to protect children from what they believe is child abuse. Let's continue, though. It has no claim to First Amendment protection. Its purveyors are child predators and misogynistic exploiters of women. Their product is as addictive as any illicit drug and as psychologically destructive as any crime. Pornography should be outlawed. Let's stop right here. There are two issues the project is addressing in this section. You have transgenderism and the education system, and then you have pornography. Okay, quote, the people who produce and distribute it should be imprisoned. Educators and public librarians who purvey it should be classed as registered sex offenders. And telecommunications and technology firms that facilitate its spread should be shuttered. Unquote. Now, some may see this as extreme, but going back to the Gordian knot philosophy, this is basically a countermeasure to the extreme position of the opposition. We see both sides and mediate in the middle, which is the chaos sector, of course. Here's the problem. Let's have a board meeting, shall we? The first issue is the educational system. The first question we pose as the mediator in a debate would be, is a child's brain fully developed? The answer is no. The next question we pose as the mediator in a debate would be, does a child understand sex, gender, sexual orientation before they are taught? The answer is no. The next question we pose as the mediator in a debate would be, since the child does not understand sex, gender, or sexual orientation until they are taught, then can they consent to being taught about sex, gender, or sexual orientation? The answer is no. The next question we pose as the mediator in a debate would be, is the parent or parents of the child the legal and natural guardian of that child? The answer is yes. The next question we pose as the mediator in a debate would be, does the parent or parents have the right to know what their children are being taught in school? The answer is yes. The next question we pose as mediators in a debate would be, do the parents have the right to disagree with what is being taught and the right to challenge what is being taught to their children? The answer is yes. We present a statement as mediators in a debate as followed. Sexual content is material depicting sexual behavior. The sexual behavior involved may be explicit, implicit sexual behavior, such as flirting, or includes sexual language and euphemisms. The key term we apply to this issue is euphemisms. Euphemisms are words or expressions used in place of one that is deemed offensive or suggests something unpleasant. Some euphemisms are intended to amuse, while others use bland and inoffensive terms or language for concepts that the user wishes to downplay. Euphemisms may be used to mask profanity or refer to topics some consider taboo. Now, we have to warn the audience that there will be graphic material presented. This is a book that a parent discovered that was available in the school library at Hastings Middle School in the state of Minnesota. As you see, there is extremely sexually graphic material that is available for middle schoolers. Quote, children in the Hastings Public Schools district can easily get their hands on a book titled Gender Queer that includes illustrations of sexual acts, a school board member said. In an interview conducted by Minnesota Senate candidate Tom Dipple, Hastings School Board member Carrie Tate confirmed that the controversial graphic novel by Maya Kobabe is available for school children in the district. The book depicts oral sex and masturbation. In response to a concerned parent who requested the removal of Gender Queer, Tate said both the district superintendent and the director of teaching and learning recommended the book remain available. But she noted the school board passed her motion to eventually discuss the availability of sexually graphic materials in the district. Tate stated, parents are astonished that it's in our school, and I think that they're appalled. It comes down to exposing children to sexually explicit materials without parental knowledge or consent. Unquote. Now, this is just flat out disgusting. It's disgusting, but let's focus on what the legal definition of what this is. This is in fact child pornography. The so-called author, Maya Kobabe, is literally distributing pornographic material to minors and should be sentenced to prison. Well, going back to the Project 2025 propositions, where all who distribute pornographic material should be imprisoned, seems they're talking about people such as Kobabe. Yet somehow, this person is allowed to walk around in the free world, drawing silly pictures and using euphemisms in your little sick novels doesn't change the fact that it's child pornography.
And just to keep drilling this home, we have to put the high beams on this issue because it is a part of the political discourse leading up to the election. Mind you, Kamala Harris and others on the left claim that Project 2025 is designed to destroy the fabric of democracy and all. Kobabe is producing material that depicts minors performing sexual acts on each other and then marketing it out to the public. I mean, this is literally distribution of child pornography. Any material depicting any form of sexual activity by minors is child pornography. Any material depicting sexual orientation, sexuality, or any form of sexual content to minors is also child pornography. Any material that uses euphemisms such as images of furry animals to disguise that sexual content, language, or message is child pornography. So we ask the $100 million question, what in the world is the federal government doing? If it were a male who wrote those books, he would be sentenced to prison. If it were a conservative male who wrote those books, the left would be up in arms, claiming he was a pedophile. Yet somehow a female who identifies as, well, whatever, from San Francisco and is a liberal just plastered child pornography in children's books, and she's celebrated and also given merits by winner awards for her novels? Wow. It's just incomprehensible.
Furthermore, the school boards are just as sick because they are allowing the distributing of the child pornography. Again, I have to keep reiterating, that's what this is. Think about the motive behind it. What's the reason for writing such novels? Never mind, she's from San Francisco, which is perfectly fine with this sickness. Now, how do you combat this when the federal government is allowing such sickness in public schools? Well, you come up with a project that outlines what measures needed to be taken to filter out all of the bad apples within the federal government, state, and local government. I would say that the left's depiction of Project 2025 is based on gaslighting the American people, when based on this small sample size of what they are concerned about, proves they are simply trying to fight back against growing tyrannical indoctrination of the youth. Now, keep in mind, these are minors aged from 10 to 13 years old. By law, this sexually graphic material, being exposed to minors, is a form of child pornography. Yet, the very law allowed the book in the library? Can you make sense of this? Seems the Gordian knot strategy has a bigger target to fight against than just the educational system. This one example, from the very same state of Minnesota, where Tim Walz was governor, allowed this sickness in that middle school. So put it into perspective here. Tim Walz allows this pornographic material in middle schools, signs executive orders to gain custody of children from parents who don't agree with gender-focused teachings in elementaries. Can this be classified as child sex trafficking? Oh my, always thought he looked a bit, let's just say morally bankrupt. You know, I'm kind of sick to my stomach now. I think we figured out where a source of child sex trafficking is coming from.
Whoa, it would explain a lot. Partners in crime, I see. You have some wacko, so-called author distributing child pornographic novels to children. Books circulate to many parts of the country, such as Minnesota, where a governor doesn't seem to care about it, doesn't sign any laws banning the books, but signs a law that comes to kidnap children from their homes. I see the inner workings of a child sex trafficking ring here. Hear me out for a moment. Indoctrinate the children in schools, teaching them that their genders are fluid and all. They then go home and tell their parents they're the opposite sex. The parents ask, where did they learn that? The child tells them the school taught them that. The parents go up to the school to complain. The school then puts the parents' names on a list called gender intolerant. Then this list is sent to the governor. They contact the parent about their child's gender identity. They have a disagreement about what the child is being taught. And before you know it, the child is taken out of the home, basically charging the parents with child neglect. Then where do you think the child ends up? Well, we would assume in foster care, but then again, maybe not. Because Tim Walz made Minnesota a sanctuary state and also a, quote, trans refuge. So just using common sense here, those children who were kidnapped were then sent to homes of transgenders. And maybe this is where child sex trafficking is happening. And even more alarming is making pedophiles a protected class. Yeah, they all came out and so-called fact-checked it, but let's dissect the mumbo-jumbo. Quote, in a previous fact-check on the same topic from PolitiFact, published in May 2023, when Walz signed the Take Pride Act, legal experts confirmed that the law would not protect pedophiles from discrimination in any way. No court in the country has, or would ever say that a law protecting people from discrimination based on their sexual orientation extends to protecting pedophilia. Brian Sowsek, a law professor at the University of California, Davis, told PolitiFact, hold on, they're from California. Kobabe is from California, who is literally distributing child pornography, which this law professor surely knows about since he deals with the law. So everything he is saying means absolutely nothing. It's all mumbo jumbo. Essentially, while the amendment in question removed a reference to, quote, a physical or sexual attachment to children by an adult, it did so in order to remove unnecessary text. Walz did sign the Take Pride Act into law, but had nothing to do with protecting pedophiles, unquote. So it says that the previous section regarding the physical or sexual attachment to children by an adult was taken out to remove unnecessary text. That is a pathetic reason, don't you think? Sounds like you're creating wiggle room for pedophiles, as that describes them directly. And I noticed the slick wording such as sexual attachment instead of sexual attraction. That, my friends, is the wiggle room they are creating to rationalize pedophilia. Sexual attachment means exactly what, in contrast to sexual attraction. It's saying the same thing as the individual is attached to someone sexually. Attached is being used to basically say the pervert is not sexually attracted to the child, but is sexually attached to them.
Yeah, they create these pseudo-intellectual euphemistic branches of empty definitions, which branch off from actual definitions to hide their true intentions. You have attachment, which is a term that has been applied to sex and sexuality when it wasn't used before. You know what term was used to describe sex and sexuality in regards to attraction? Goddamn attraction. Sexual attraction. Why replace the term with another term that describes the same thing? Because attachment is used interchangeably here, meaning the pedophile can say they're, quote, attached to children, but not necessarily attracted to them. So they receive a slap on the wrist for, I don't know, suggesting to take their neighbor's daughter to the park on the weekends to give the parents a break. In court, the judge couldn't prove pedophilia here. This is classified as attachment by the wackos, not attraction. So the way something is worded changes the reality of their actions, which changes the intention of the pervert in their view. Minnesota State Representative Lee Fink, the first transgender elected to the Minnesota legislative body, is the one that took out the section about being attracted to, oh wait, wrong word, being attached to children by an adult. As you see, the section that says, quote, does not include a physical or sexual attachment to children by an adult had been omitted in the bill. Now, they claim it was because they wanted to get rid of unnecessary text, right? Well, look at all of the text above that sentence. Isn't that enough taken out? Of course, the reason they omitted that section in the revision is to essentially tolerate sexual orientation or physical and sexual attachment to children by an adult. They had it in there for a reason, and Finca revised it to omit that section. Quote, Fink's amendment removed the last half of the definition, which included the line referring to a physical or sexual attachment to children by an adult. Sexual orientation is defined based on people's attachment to people dependent on the sex of that person, not the age of that person. As such, the line about a physical or sexual attachment to children by an adult was irrelevant to the definition. Wow. Did they just say that? I'll come back to this, of course. Quote, the Minnesota House Research Department created a summary of the amendment that concisely explained this point. That summary said the amendment removes language from the existing definition of sexual orientation that included having or being perceived as having an identity not traditionally associated with one's biological male or female traits. Unquote. A bunch of pseudo-intellectual nonsense, just making crap up as they go along. Here's the slick wording. Quote, sexual orientation is dependent on the sex of that person, not the age of that person. Unquote. Yet, the previous bill included the section about a physical or sexual attachment to children by an adult. So, why was that previously in the bill then? Well, it was to distinguish the very thing that was explained, right? But the reason it was previously in the bill is because they had to address pedophilia as it's linked to sexual orientation, such as the sexual preference, or get this, sexual orientation they have, such as a male pedophile who is sexually attracted to, or wait, sexually attached to only boys. In addition, their definition of sexual orientation being defined by someone being attached to someone else, depending on the sex of that person, still includes children. You know why? Because a child is, get this, a person. And this is why it's a wiggle room they've created by omitting that section. They didn't have to take that section out, as it does apply to the definition of sexual orientation. Who has the right definitions of this nonsense? Quote, sexual orientation and sexual preference are related terms, but they have different connotations. Sexual orientation describes sexual attraction, behavior, and identity. Sexual preference, synonymous with sexual orientation, refers to the expressions of one's predilections or sexual desires. However, the term sexual preference is now considered offensive as it implies that a person can choose their attractions. Oh, yeah, that's a form of defense for pedophiles as well. Oh, they can't choose whether to be attracted to children or not. Yeah, you see? But here it says sexual orientation describes sexual attraction. There is no distinction, just sexual attraction. So the section about being attracted to children did belong in the bill, and that's why it was there. But the transgender, who doesn't look too emotionally and mentally stable, I might add, took it out to give a subtle clearance to pedophiles who fall in that category. Now, is there any wonder why the state of Minnesota has one of the highest rates of child sexual exploitation? It's exposed from the state itself by the Minnesota Judicial Branch's website. Quote, sex trafficking of Minnesota children. Sexual exploitation of children is happening in every Minnesota county. In fact, Minnesota has the third highest rate of child sexual exploitation. Child sex trafficking, such as child prostitution, juvenile prostitution, commercial sexual exploitation of children, and survival sex, is among the most insidious abuses of children, and all too often these children are treated as criminals rather than victims. Now, what has Tim Walz, as governor of the state of Minnesota, done to combat this problem? Haven't heard him brag about enforcing tougher laws on child sex traffickers. Haven't heard about him signing laws that restrict access of sexually graphic material in the public schools. But he is signing laws up to high hell for the LGBTQ community, signing executive orders to come kidnap children from homes, literally separating families. Would it be a far-fetch to suggest that Tim Walz was actually enabling child sex trafficking? Enabling the distribution of child pornography in public schools? One could suggest very much so. Look at all of this criminal activity going on in the state of Minnesota. And what's Tim Walz done about it? Nothing, and I'm gonna just conclude he is a part of child sex trafficking. Another thing he may have picked up in his glorious days of travel to China. This is Kamala Harris's running mate. She's from San Francisco, They both are from states where children are being exploited, indoctrinated in the public schools, and these two individuals are potentially the next administration in the United States. Harris wants to legalize prostitution. Tim Walz enables sex trafficking of minors. This is a potential doomsday scenario for the United States. Which brings us back to the porn industry. In the Project 2025's propositions, it suggests that it should be banned due to its negative impact on society. Of course, you have the group Hands Off My Porn trying to fight for the right to destroy the minds of the people with their content. Everyone has watched pornography, some watch it frequently, and others, well, that's their reality. Pornography is an addiction that many people have, especially men. Here are the problems that Project 2025 raises, justifying their goal of having it banned. I'll let our guest break this down. She's the sex expert.
Thank you very much. Now let me mention something before we get started. The website Pornhub is suing the state of Texas for their age verification law they enforced. Now I ask you, why would a company that distributes sexual content to the public have a problem with a state ensuring that they are making sure the users are 18 years old? Because they don't want restrictions on their website. And I think we all know what that means. Let's get started though. Here are some of the major problems that pornography creates. I do not personally support Project 2025, but at least they are posing provisions that help clean up all these dark alleys in town. Something that Pornhub wants to keep filthy. Number 1. Its material is generally available to anyone with access to the internet. Pornhub comes to mind, right? Most of these porn sites simply ask if the user is 18 years of age, they click yes, and they have instant access to the material. Other sites actually have a more strict policy, making sure the user is in fact 18 years of age. Nevertheless, there are so many pornographic websites in cyberspace, the youth can easily access it with no authentic verification. Number 2, let's be honest, pornography has a shock value to it, and most youth who view it for the first time are actually traumatized by what they see. Then they become addicted and desensitized to that material. Number 3, there is no benefit to viewing pornography other than self-gratification. Self-gratification, or simply put, masturbation, is something the youth do when going through puberty. It's a normal behavioral phase in their life. But when pornography is introduced, it becomes an addiction rather than naturally discovering your sexual desires and hormonal changes. For adults, the problems are just exacerbated to such a level. Most adults can't function without viewing such material on a daily basis. Number 4. In addition to number 3, pornography affects your hormonal balance. The brain releases a chemical called dopamine. While the individual is watching pornography, the brain releases this chemical as it assumes sexual intercourse is about to take place. But instead, in most cases, only masturbation has taken place. So pornography alters the brain function in relation to sexual activity. This also leads to many sexual dysfunctions, interactions, and behavior. Number 5, it lowers testosterone and libido levels in men. It lowers a man's ability to maintain an erection during sexual intercourse. Also, it alters the perception of what a man finds attractive in the real world, as they subconsciously align their preferences of women in porn to what they desire in the real world. All of this leads to narcissism and materialism. The same concept applies with women. Both sexes in society base their standards on what they view in pornography, which is not reality, nor is it actually authentic. It psychologically and emotionally pulls individuals out of reality and into a fantasy, so they become more antisocial, heavily dependent on drugs, alcohol, and other enhancements to engage sexually with their counterparts. Pornography is not about true intimacy. There is no passion, no sensuality. It's fast food. And this is how individuals in society treat sexual intercourse, like fast food. Number 6, pornography induces depression, hopelessness, anger, and various mental disorders. Depression is the leading cause of antisocialism, drug use, anger, and even suicide. Pornography, especially with men and younger men, creates a contrast of their manhood and success with other men in porn. This often leads to men feeling inadequate, self-conscious, and lack of confidence. All these negative impacts lead to the aforementioned problems. Number 7, the industry nor the federal government haven't officially banned the distribution of child pornography and other forms of obscene sexual material. On a popular porn website, you can search for obscene pornographic material. Not child pornography, but the obscene material specifically expands the user's sexual tolerance, which leads to some of the dysfunctional behaviors and mental illnesses mentioned prior. Child pornography is being distributed by companies. We have to keep this in mind. Now think about this. Why aren't these companies being sued? Why aren't these distributors being arrested and thrown in prison? Because the sad truth is the major companies who lurk in the shadows are funded by powers within the government. It's the sad and horrific truth. Number 8. Pornography lures minors into the industry by sending scouting agents to many states across the United States. We've all heard about or have spotted a video that's titled something like Young Angels or Perverted Stepdad's Christmas Gift. Well, those are actually minors performing sexual intercourse in an industry that scouts for minors to act in their films. Put this into perspective. A website like Pornhub is suing a state that requires an age verification to view the material, right? Pornhub disagrees with that law, so of course they feel it should be accessible upon visiting. This means they are perfectly fine with minors surfing through their site, so we can also come to the conclusion that the company is recruiting these same minors to perform in their films. I think everyone knows this, but we're addressing this based on Project 2025's propositions. Take stripping as the perfect analogy. Most female strippers make the most money when they're younger. Most female prostitutes, coined sex workers, make the most money when they're younger. Why? Because those men are attracted to younger women more, as their physical bodies are often more petite and firm. I hope no one is feeling uncomfortable with this point. We are all adults here. It is the same concept in the porn industry. The younger the women, the more attraction and motivation those male actors have in performing with those actresses. The more attraction and motivation, the better the film is on camera to the viewers, which generates more traffic to the site, which makes the site more money. And sadly, many of those younger women are addicted to drugs, have many abortions, become infected with transmitted diseases, and aren't paid very well to boot. Often their families have abandoned them. Some have come from homes where they experienced sexual assault, domestic violence, molestation, and other traumatic experiences. Some were homeless, got into prostitution, then made their way to the porn industry. They are used and abused, and do not have the proper legal representation. Because they are so ignorant to the industry they are joining, they are often manipulated by agents, managers, staff, and other co-workers. Talk about women's rights. They don't seem too concerned about representing these young women who are taking advantage of. Hey, number 9, pornography is a direct source of human and sex trafficking. What you see in films is not what is often the truth. The smiles, the laughter, the so-called orgasms. But behind closed doors, there is sadness, confusion, misery, feeling trapped. There are females who have been literally bought by, quote, sex auctioneers, and then sent to the industry in a business cell. It's not just females, though, as young males are also taken advantage of. Pornography is a male-centered industry, with females being the trophy prize. Many of the young women are initially terrified by hundreds of older men surrounding them. And this is where the drugs come into the equation, or alcohol. It's no different than a female in society being gang raped. It's truly horrifying. After that first horrific experience, though, she is comforted, provided drugs for her depression and money. That is the life of your average female porn star. And it is primarily the women in the porn industry who are driving the force behind the $100,000 endorsement for Kamala Harris to fight against pornography being banned. Because most of those women have already decided to not settle down and have a family. It's their main source of income. And it would be quite difficult to return to the traditional workforce with, a resume of penises. Male actors have a bit more flexibility. They can just go work construction and call it a day. A bit unfair, but physically they still have a demand in the traditional workforce. And last but not least, number 10, pornography encourages sexual assault, rape, molestation, domestic abuse, and infidelity. Some men who view these films frequently, depicting women in a submissive and vulnerable state, start to adopt some of the traits depicted in the films. More aggression leads to thoughts of sexual assault, rape, molestation, domestic abuse, and infidelity. It simply has no benefit for society and the fabric of a culture's common practices. So, 10 facts that I have presented about pornography justifies that at the very least there should be a nationwide age verification policy on every site to ensure minors do not have access to this material. And it's not just a tab that asks the user, are they 18 years old? No, you have to actually prove that you're 18 years old with identification and an email address. This makes it more difficult for some horny 16-year-old from gaining access to the site just by clicking an age verification tab. And this is what sites like Pornhub definitely dread, because let's be honest, a lot of traffic on these sites has a huge percentage of minors. Most of the demographic are males, and I would suggest it's from 13 to 25 years old. It cuts into their money, because the minors can't access the site anymore. And that's a huge percentage of the viewers and browsing time that generates revenue. I think this is a reasonable compromise presented by states such as Texas. If you ask my personal opinion, I would say pornography should be banned. But it's like a drug to many, even if they don't use it all the time. They want it to be available to them when they do want to use it. You see, I conclude, the government makes money off of it. We all know this, but think about what this industry actually is, as mentioned in the previous points. The porn industry traffics minors. They scout for these minors in all communities across the country. Most of the female actresses start out under the age of 18 years old, which means they are minors. And the federal government is allowing minors to be trafficked into this industry. And there is a huge double standard, of course. How easy is it for someone to just type in a porn website and have instant access? Yet, if a social media platform doesn't like your opinion or views, your channel is shut down. If you're going to censor something, make sure you're censoring material that destroys the lives of millions of people on a daily basis.
Great work. That's the best way to solve problems: clean, direct, and precise. Like mentioned, I do believe that there is a connection between individuals like Maya Kobabe, distributing child pornographic novels to public schools, a transgender state representative in Lee Fink fighting to pass laws, the transgender ideology taught in school, and child sex trafficking. Minnesota is supporting evidence of this theory, not only with that story from Hastings Middle School, but also Tim Walz's eagerness in defending the LGBTQ community and pushing gender-reaffirming ideologies on the youth, making the state a sanctuary state, which means the state essentially is gated off, like a separate country within a country. And when you create this regional barrier, you are more likely to scribble outside the lines as far as the law. Not to generalize, but some of the transgender community, I reiterate, not generalizing, but some of the transgender community has had cases of individuals who have been charged with possession of child pornography. There have been a considerable amount of these cases, and although it doesn't represent the community as a whole, there seems to be a connection or sexual preference or even sexual attachment to children. Why do drag queens want to read to children in schools? Is it because they always wanted to be a teacher? I doubt it. Is it because they love children? Possibly. But I think it's more about the innocence of the children they're drawn to, and because they're not so innocent, they try to find some relativity of what was like to be normal through interacting with children. They won't be shunned, they won't be laughed at, like some adults would do. Children do not have the same type of prejudices the same way adults do. The core of the problem is when you radicalize policy, you change how a society interacts and alter the cultural practices and beliefs so much that it becomes difficult to uphold a balanced morale. Such as pornography, the porn stars claim it's unconstitutional and all. But the Constitution, although not perfect, is based on a universal sense of morality, in which the laws and rights were given to the people. Once you alter the perception of what is right or wrong, you blur the lines of what is right or wrong, which blurs the lines of what is legal and illegal, and so forth. So they're placing ads in support for Kamala Harris on Pornhub. Wow. Never thought a presidential candidate endorsement would be plastered alongside some porn vid. I mean, let's be real. Do they honestly think some 21-year-old male is worried about voting during their time on a porn website? I think he's a bit. Let's just say he's too preoccupied with certain tasks while on the site. It's actually a major problem for the Harris campaign because it puts her in a compromising position. Either Harris comes out publicly defending the Hands Off My Porn organization, which essentially is supporting the porn industry, not a good look from an ethical view as a presidential candidate, or she tries to stay silent about their endorsement for her. Knowing Harris, she will end up speaking about it and actually defending their rights. Wouldn't be surprised if she says something wacky like, these are consenting adults earning an honest living who grew up in the middle class, and nobody has the right to deny them that right to freedom and choices. You may not agree with what they do, but you are not judge and jury of another person's life. Yeah, you might want to tell your running mate the same thing, as he didn't allow parents to raise their children the way they see fit. And you see, that just magnifies the belief he was secretly enabling child sex trafficking. All of that criminal activity was happening during his time as governor, and somehow he had the time to sign an executive order to kidnap children away from the parents, as opposed to signing executive orders protecting children from child sex trafficking. What do you expect with corrupt politicians? My colleagues have already broken this down in prior episodes. The closer you get to the presidential election, the more wacky things get. And for Democrats, everything that has happened thus far is basically them conceding defeat. I mean, Harris has the endorsement of the porn industry for fuck's sake, and Magic Johnson, heck, and even Obama is showing frustration, flat out begging black men to vote for her. This is a sinking ship in the Democratic Party, and I wouldn't be surprised if some of them just abandon everything to save their political careers. This is the chaos sector.